Join us.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this fourth session. I am Rhonda Velaba, and you probably got an email from me this morning announcing that the Connect Young Nebraskans Summit registration is officially open. I will tell you, I am so excited, and I'll try not to watch my email, but I keep getting notifications as people sign up. So if you see me glance over here, I'll try to stay focused here. But if you have not received the information or you're looking for the information about the Connecting Young Nebraskans 2021 Summit, you can go to our website, connectingyoungnebraskans.org, and find that, .com, and find that on the website and get registered for the October 22nd Summit in Ord, Nebraska. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Bennett to kick us off for this fourth session of Entrepreneurship. Is it for you?
Thanks, Rhonda. Hopefully you can all see the right presentation screen. Always fun when you share screens in Zoom. So as Rhonda said, I'm Sarah Bennett with Nebraska Business Development Center. And thank you for being with us for some of the sessions, all of the sessions. So this is the final one. So where do I go from here? Kind of compiling together what we've talked about so far and sharing another owner's story. This one I think is unique. Melissa has experience as an economic development director, and then she and her husband recently, so within the last 2 years, became business owners. So she has both sides of the equation, which I find fascinating, and getting her perspective from that standpoint, I think will be good. So let's get started. So why are we here? And I'll go through this quickly because I think some of you were on here last time. So this series was developed because now is with the pandemic, kind of a pivotal time to think about what's next. That's what a lot of people are doing. And so what's next personally and professionally. I don't know if Melissa had that in her mind, maybe just for her husband about what's next. And now there's a big change in her life. And so why entrepreneurship? So for Nebraska Business Development Center, it's very much part of what we do. And I thought there was a great opportunity to partner with Connecting Young Nebraskans on this topic. And I'll get into a little bit later about the role of Nebraska Business Development Center. But I really thought CYN was a fit because CYN members are just very curious people, goal-minded, visionaries, all of these things on your screen. And I thought, what a great audience to reach in terms of talking about entrepreneurship and owning your own business, whether you're starting or buying one, and making that next leap in life. So Sarah Bennett, I obviously work for Nebraska Business Development Center, but I've also been actively involved in Grand Island Young Professionals for 10 years. I might be aging out now, or if you're in it for 10 years, maybe you just get kicked out because I've been there too long. And I've been engaged with programming with CYN for about 8 years. And then I've been part of Nebraska Business Development Center for 10. And I think maybe I was hitting that 10 number, right, in a decade. And I'm asking myself, what's next, right? I've accomplished some things, but what's next? So just kind of general overview about Nebraska Business Development Center. So one kind of big umbrella, but then 5 programs that stem from that. So the kind of focus for today is the Small Business Development Center program, where we are working with businesses across the state to start businesses, grow their businesses. Our Procurement Technical Assistance Center helps folks when they're looking at selling their goods or services to the government. There's a process to do that. And it just works a lot easier if you work with our PTech folks to help navigate all of the nuances. Our innovation team helps companies apply for federal research and development grants if they're looking at innovative technologies that are at a concept level, need kind of feasibility, and then a minimum viable product, and then ultimately lead to commercialization. SourceLink, that's Jamie Bright, who's on the call today. She's leading that initiative with our resource navigator and connecting individuals to resources across the state. I think the resource navigator has over 800 profiles in there now, right, Jamie?
872, I think, was the last count.
And here after 10 years, I thought I knew a lot of them. I, without a doubt, do not know 800. So I think I need to do some homework and brush up on what's in there, which is why it's a resource. We've got that because there's so much and it's hard for everybody to know everything. So we can pinpoint you there and lead you in the right direction. And then our NU Connections arm is connecting businesses, individuals with the University of Nebraska system, whether that's to people, to faculty, to resources there or facilities, and bridging that connection, because the university system in its entirety is a lot, and it's hard to know which pathway to take and which gate to enter. So generally about the Small Business Development Center side. So starting a business, you need a business plan, you need guidance, help getting financing in place. Our office does all of that, and then helping to grow, whether you're looking at exporting, or maybe you're in a phase of transition and looking at valuing the business, succession planning, and then transition. So where in this series, we've talked about buying and selling a business. And in my perspective, I see it from both sides of the equation, because I'm one of a 2-person team that's under Nebraska Business Development Center that does the valuation and the succession planning. And then depending on where you are, we're across the state. Oh, but maybe we need to update the map because Jamie's in Kimball, so we can put another dot in the panhandle to help cover our state. So this is the final session, session 4, where do I go from here? So these other sessions we have recorded. Session 2, we had a technical glitch. So 1 and 3 are up on Connecting Young Nebraskans YouTube channel. And session 4 will go there as well. So you can reference back to things, see slide decks, or hear, more importantly, the good stuff that each owner has told us about their journey and what it's like and what they've experienced. So with each of these sessions, I've kind of shared a story about an owner kind of in their journey. And this one is a special one in particular. And so kind of thinking about what's next. So Mel Johnson here in the picture. I've known her for 20 years. I used to babysit her girls, and they knew what I did in helping businesses get started. And one day they kind of asked in a casual get together setting about restaurants. And I said, yeah, you don't want to do that. The failure rate's super high. Like more than half of them fail. Terrible idea. Didn't really know they were pursuing it at the time. So I was incredibly honest with them. And then they called me a month later and said, hey, we asked that because we want to start a restaurant. And I said, oh, let's work on that. And they've been doing some barbecue competitions and catering on the side for several years. And they said, we want to do it as a business, but also create an opportunity in Central City for some more breakfast and lunch items. And so they opened in 2016. And I was there over the weekend. And because I live outside of Kearney, we don't get there as often as I would like. And we went in at 10:30 for breakfast and they were swamped. So 5 years later, they made it past the failing point. So they proved me wrong, and I'm delighted that they did. But this was a second career choice for Mel. She had more of a medical background. I think it's a medical transcription and things. And so she'd been in that world for 20 years. And she said, I'm over it. I want a new change in life. So while this presentation is targeted at kind of a younger audience, it's also not to say that you can't make a switch. I think Mel was early mid-40s when she made her switch. So, and she's still loving it, even though she's waking up at 5 a.m. To start getting things ready. She's still loving it. So as we talk about kind of where do I go from here? So 3 things to think about as you're deciding, do I buy a business or do I start a business? Kind of boiling it down into 3 things. So what experience do you have? What kind of business do you want? And then third one, how open are you to taking financial risks? And so we'll dive into these a little bit, what each one means. So experience. So if you have maybe minimal experience with business topics, you're like, yeah, I never took business. That was not my world. Hard pass on that. Or maybe you're good at the business part, but maybe you're not as familiar with an industry that you're considering pursuing. So maybe buying is the better path. Because with buying, you've got an established business model. Hopefully the seller will help you with that transition. So you're just not getting handed the keys and saying, okay, good luck. The employees are a huge asset. They've been there. They understand how things work. They understand processes. They're trained in the business. And then vendors, that's one not to forget either. They know the specialized orders of the business. They know what your inventory flow needs to look like and things like that. So, if we've got some minimal experience either on the business side or maybe within the industry, buying might be a better fit. That's just one of the three things to consider. But if you've got, a vast experience, maybe you're familiar with financing, kind of infrastructure, cash flow, that's an important one. Maybe starting and starting from the ground up and creating a new venture for you. Second thing to think about is what kind of business. So if it's really important for you to have that business really tied with your personal brand or something you've created, started on your own, then starting might be the better fit, right? Because in Mel and her husband Jay's case, they had been doing their own barbecue stuff on the side and creating it all. So it didn't make sense to buy a business for them. They started from scratch, created their own flair on it, and provided an opportunity that wasn't previously there in the community. And you can also create your own structure, write your own operating policies, pick your staff. And there might, then you're not dealing with past issues of maybe poor performance or troublesome employees. But if you're like, you know what, I want to go on a path of growth, I want to take something that's been established and take it to that next stage, maybe buying is a better option. And the third thing to think about, so a lot here, this is financial, but it's a lot to think about. So buying side requires a larger initial payment, right? So you're buying something somebody created. So in a lot of cases, it's going to be worth more. You have more upfront, but the banks are more willing to loan money because there's an established track record. Banks are fairly averse to startups because there's not a track record there. You don't have to, when you're buying a business, have the cost of hiring employees or the cost that it takes to build up a customer base and create a product. All of that has already been done. And you hopefully have immediate cash flow where you're not having to create the business. It's already continuing and you have that cash coming in to pay the bills, to pay payroll, hopefully pay yourself. And then other things to think about, people tend to forget sometimes when they're buying a business is the seller will say, okay, I want 500,000 for this business. But there may be other things that you have to think about. Some businesses, you may not have cash flow right away, but the bills are coming in. So then you have to have maybe another 50,000 in cash to start making payments on things because in a lot of instances, the cash remains with the seller and the liabilities remain with the seller. So you still need cash to pay those liabilities that are going to be forthcoming for payroll taxes and inventory and things like that. Or maybe you need to upgrade the facility. Maybe the owner hasn't touched it in a while and it needs some tender loving care. And so you have to account for those additional costs. But on the starting side, in terms of the financial piece, greater risk, right? Because you're developing projections and no matter how great those projections are, it's still a great guess, right? Nobody would have predicted the pandemic and what that did for businesses. I've got a client that they were open for all of 3 months when the pandemic hit. They're still thriving. And so beyond surviving, they're thriving. So they made it through, but not something we included in their projections in the first 12 months for sure. And cash flow can be unpredictable. And sometimes it might require cash infusion from the owner in that first year. That's happened for sure. And you may not make any money as an owner, may not take a salary for a couple of years. And the cash put in the beginning is less. So maybe your upfront costs are less as you're starting and you say, okay, it's going to take me 100,000 to get started with this business, where if you bought a similar business, it might have cost you 3 times that amount. So less upfront, but in exchange, you may not have, enough cash flow for salary those first couple of years. So what's next? So there's a lot here, but we'll break it down. So what I want folks to think about kind of what's next is, so assessing personal finances, and the tool for this session is taking a look at that and asking some questions and taking some notes about where's kind of your financial situation now for buying a business or starting one, and what does it need to look like when you're ready to make that leap. So think about how much money you need to live on annually. What are your expenses? What savings do you have now? But then also how much are you going to need to achieve your goals and still have some to live on for sure. And then think about your credit history. Do you have any past issues? And is it high enough to get financing? Then I also want you to think about your time. So a lot of us have full plates now. So if this is something you're going to plan for or get into, then there needs to be some time to think about, okay, what are my priorities? What needs to be cut to take this on as a priority? What's important to me? But then also think about the business venture in itself. Can this be a side gig for a while you scale up and have full-time employment and get some cash? Or do you have to jump both feet in and go full-time immediately? Side hustles are a big thing right now, and people having kind of side jobs and things. So if that's an opportunity for you, that's a great way to have kind of both feet and figuring it out. But that's not always an option. In the case of restaurants, most of the time, not an option unless you're like Mel and Jay, who did some catering on the side. Melissa and her husband jumped full feet. And so Melissa had 2 full-time jobs for a while. Or maybe you want to get experience and you shadow in a business or you work part-time just to get a really good feel for the business until you're ready to start your own or buy one. And then think about getting a support system in place. So at some point, you're going to have to ask for help. Maybe you've got children at home and you're going to need people to help watch kids while you're taking on this venture because you're working, early hours or evening or things like that. So determine, if that's something you need. Cut things out that you don't need, right? If you mow your lawn now, maybe you pay somebody else to do it because your time is worth something and it's cheaper to have somebody mow your lawn or take care of your snow. Winter is not too far around the corner. Or think about, do you order meal kits or something like that instead of grocery shopping and getting all of your meals? Just what are the things that you can shortcut if you're adding more to your plate? And ultimately determine what adds value to your time and what's going to help you achieve your goals. And then I want you to write down those goals. So whether they're personal, whether they're professional, or they're financial, and just kind of keeping track of that and what that looks like. So I would encourage you to use the tools that are in the session, and I will drop that Google Drive folder in the chat. And start with self-assessment 1, which was just, okay, what are kind of my entrepreneurship traits? What does this look like? Kind of an internal assessment, and then move through each session's tools to help you kind of think through everything. Sometimes it just helps to have steps to lead us through and to make those decisions. So if you're a community leader, some of this was a little bit of the question. So I dropped a few things in here, not a lot. These are just the things that kind of came to my mind. So I would say, as you're working with folks in your community, as you are connecting with other community leaders, ask young professionals, what do their goals look like? Are they interested in starting a business? Do they want to buy one? How do we get them to that next stage? Because chances are, and I've heard this from a lot of economic developers, they know businesses that are looking to retire, or they know the individual that probably should retire soon. But making that connection between who's going to buy it and selling it are key components. And so just having those conversations with the young people in your community, and maybe even starting it as young as high school level, and showing those students that there's opportunities in their communities. And how do they, know that and not go out of their community and not come back. So making those connections. And then I would encourage you to tell folks to check out the recorded sessions, so this one and prior sessions, and then use the tools provided in the Google Drive folder to start that process, right? You don't have to recreate the wheel. You just say, here's some tools, get started. And then of course, be happy to have you reach out to our office at Nebraska Business Development Center to see how we can support you and the businesses in your community. One last thing I wanted to highlight too is in the last year, we developed a program called Enlighten, which is an on-demand virtual library of courses and things, and we break it down into modules that are 20 minutes each. So I've had a lot of people through the years say, well, I'm great at mechanics, and I'm gonna start my own mechanic shop, but I don't know business. How do I get up to speed on that without going to get a degree in business? And so we've got topics on there in a lot of different areas where people can work through that content, on their own timetable, but get more comfortable with business topics as they're either starting or growing their businesses. And then here's Melissa right here. She was our featured person on our intro videos for the Entrepreneurial Journey series that we did featuring owners in Western Nebraska as a way to help others know more about what it's like hearing from owners themselves. And so this series is a little bit similar to that, but these are just the owners. You don't hear me at all. They're just sharing their stories. And it's really great stuff. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more about each of them. And now, the best part of it, we turn it over to the owner and we hear from them and about their story. And so with us today, we have Melissa Norgard. So she and her husband Stan own Sam and Louie's, a pizza franchise started out of Omaha. They're based in Sidney. And then they also recently started within the last couple of months, Boss City Brewing. So they're doing craft beer and they do a great job. I had to do some quality assurance for sure when I've been working there in town. So Melissa, I would like you to tell us kind of your story, how you got into Sam and Louie's and then adding the Boss City component to it.
So thanks for having me. First of all, I really love speaking on these platforms and kind of telling my story because like Sarah said, I do think it's a little bit unique. I don't think a lot of times people have experience on both sides and then jump full feet into being an entrepreneur when I've never really considered myself an entrepreneur. So I'm actually born and raised in Sidney. I grew up here. My parents still live here. My sisters still live here. I went to college in Kearney. And when I was in college, I met a college roommate who was in the nursing program there. When she was done with the nursing program, she had gotten a job in San Diego. And one day we were sitting in our apartment and she said, well, I'm moving to San Diego. How much money do you have in your bank account? And I worked 2 jobs there. And she said, I'll pay a rent for 2 months if you come with me and try to find a job there. So we left. And moved to San Diego and staying there for almost 10 years. I worked at a full service marketing and promotional advertising agency for an entrepreneur who had started in the furniture business in the 1970s selling waterbeds. And then waterbeds took off and he was really, really successful and ended up starting this advertising agency for furniture companies across the West Coast. So while I lived out there, I met Stan. He actually worked at a restaurant and bar, a really popular place right down by the water, half a block from the ocean. Their specialty was fish tacos. He worked there for over 10 years and worked his way up the ladder and was eventually the manager there. So he decided he didn't want to do restaurant and bar anymore. He was working late nights, oftentimes till 2 or 3 in the morning. So he left that job to do some video freelancing type stuff out in San Diego. So he lost his job there and we were back in Sidney visiting family for Christmas time and had drinks with some friends who both worked at Cabela's. And they said, why don't you guys move back here? If your dream is to own a house and have kids and live the American dream, Cabela's is recruiting people like crazy, good money. They have jobs for both of you. And I said, no way. I always told myself, I'm moving back to small town Nebraska. I don't want to live there. I don't want to raise my family there. And believe it or not, Stan, he was born in Long Beach and raised most of his life in Orange County and then lived in San Diego. He went to school at San Diego State University. He's actually the one, when we got back to San Diego, said, I want to move back to Sidney. And I thought, what? So we sat down, had some more serious conversations about it, started applying for jobs at Cabela's. 2012 is when Cabela's was really going gangbusters. They were building 10 or 12 new stores a year. So we moved back and we both got really good jobs there. And then some things started happening out there, and soon enough, the creative department that Stan was doing video and editing work for was now being outsourced to a third party, and he got laid off and was told he had to reapply for his job through the new creative company, Quad Graphics. He did get a new job with Quad. I kept working at Cabela's, so we thought everything was just, fine and dandy, kept moving along. Had a son, and as we were moving through life every day, eventually Cabela's purchase was finalized, and I decided that I wanted to make the move to do something better for my community. I always knew that Sidney had more to it than just Cabela's. So the role of economic development director here in Sidney came up. And one of the councilmen who I actually knew and had a relationship working at Cabela's had called me and said, I think you should apply. I said, I don't know what economic development is, and I'm not really sure I'm the person for that job. And he said, well, actually, you're the perfect person for the job because you were born and raised here. You have a passion for the community and you're smart. And I know that you have the drive to do what's going to need to be done in this job in the next 5 years. And quite honestly, I wanted to run the other direction because Cabela's was being out, so you did what's going to happen with that employed, 2,000 people in this town and surrounding communities, and everybody was scared. A lot of people were leaving town, a lot of people were finding opportunities, a lot of people were taking different jobs. People were selling their houses for dirt cheap, and I just didn't know if I wanted to take that on. So I had a lot of conversations with Stan and my mom, my dad, and I eventually said, you know what, I'm going to try it. Because if I don't try it, I'm always going to regret not trying it and not trying to do something good for my community. So I took the bull by the horns, and the city manager at the time, he had a lot of economic development experience, and he took me aside and said, I gave you this job for a reason. You're a Spitfire, and I know that you can go out and do things, and you can probably push the limits a little bit, but if you get in trouble, just ask for forgiveness. So that's what I did. I started pounding the pavement. I started looking for new companies, started, trying to connect with people, starting to meet with people who were former Cabela's employees who had ideas about how to go about doing that. So partnering with the executive director at the college here, the community college, Paula Abbott, I met Sarah, and we all sat down with the chamber director at the time and kind of said, where do we go from here? We're losing all these jobs, but all of these people are so talented. We have all of these great people here. How do we keep them here? How do we work to make our idea come to fruition? How can we help them start a business? How can we find those businesses that are starting to, want to transition out? And how can we bring somebody else into those roles? So really, working with all of those people that I just mentioned, changing for this community. Yes, we were successful in recruiting some companies, some very successful manufacturing companies here. But the bottom line is the community has worked hard to grow itself, and people have put themselves out there. They put a lot of their own money on the line, and those businesses are now seeing the fruits of their labor and are now seeing the success and seeing the rewards for taking the leap. Sarah did that entrepreneurship journey videos, and the stories that you hear on there just, man, that's the reason that people do this job, I think. That's the reason that people get into economic development, because they want to see success from things like that. Yeah, all the big windows, Amazon moving to your community, or Google's building the new data center, those are all awesome things. But seeing somebody that wanted to start their own business and invested, $100,000 of their own money, putting it on the line, risking it, and not knowing if it would ever work, those stories are, they get me a little bit more. So I started at economic development in March of 2017. January of 2020, a local business owner who owns Sam and Louie, his name's Jerry Steffens, came in my office at City Hall and said, I'm closing my restaurant in 2 weeks. If you can find somebody who wants to buy it, great. If not, I'm going to put a close sign up on the door and we're closing. And I said, why? My wife and I want to retire. I just had to fire the manager and I don't have anyone to run the place. You know, he's in his early 60s. They wanted to be retired and it was just too much work for them. So my wheels had started turning. Stan was editing video for a company here called Worldwide Trophy Adventures. He was working from home, so he was working in the basement. His our little video editing room. He wasn't happy. We were always talking about what are we going to do to, you know, get you out of the basement and get you back into doing something that you want to do. So immediately after a conversation, I came home at dinner that night, I told Stan, well, I think we should buy Sam and Louie's. And he looked at me like I was crazy and said, do you want me to be a pizza boy the rest of my life? And I said, well, I look at it as we're going to, you know, invest in the community and buy our business. So we kept talking about it, and I knew Jerry also wanted to sell his building where Sam and Louie's had their space, and there were 2 residential apartments that he had, you know, invested money in renting 9 years ago, and they were very nice. And we just kept talking about it, and finally we said, we're going to do it, because if we don't do it, we're always going to wonder why we didn't do it. And somebody else is going to do it and be successful, and then we're going to be ticked off because we didn't take the risk. So January 2020, we bought the franchise. We met with the franchise owners. They came out here, sat down, had conversations with them about moving the franchise over to us. So all of Stan's restaurant experience came back into play. So those long stints of working late nights, he was going to be that person all over again. That was Sarah a lot to finalize the business plan, go over financials. I mean, they had been in business for 9 years. They started in 2011, but looking through their financial statements, I just knew that there was so much more opportunity. I knew that they were not efficiently running the business. They probably were missing a lot of things. They weren't that involved. They were, you know, kind of handed it off to let these other 2 people manage the front of the house and the back of the house. And I just knew that there was such an opportunity to improve the sales, find some efficiencies, lower the cost of things. And that if anyone could do it, Stan could be the one to go in there and find some of those things, and that we could end up making a real go at this thing. So lots of conversations, put a lot of thought and effort into a formalized business plan and financial statements, and kept going to banks here and wanting to get a loan for not only buying the building, but also for purchasing all of the equipment, the tables, the chairs. And we weren't having any luck. It was frustrating because we don't have a lot of debt. We have decent credit, and unfortunately we were buying a business that the last few years they showed a loss on most of their financial statements. So the bank didn't want to take the risk. Even though we said, well, these are all of the things we're going to go in and change, the banks here didn't want to take the risk. So ended up partnering with Nebraska Enterprise Fund to get some money through an SBA program, which I would have never known about if it wasn't for being in economic development and meeting people like Sarah at NBDC. I would have never known about any of that money out there, that any of those partners even existed. So I felt like I kind of had a one up there because I had experience working with entrepreneurs here locally, and I knew that there were people that weren't bankers out there that wanted to invest in small businesses. So we got some funding and we were off the races. So we finalized all the purchase stuff in January, the end of January. We closed for a month to do some minor upgrades, painting, cleaning, those types of things. we reopened February 26th, and we were so busy. The community was so excited the restaurant didn't close, that we were the new owners, and then COVID hit. And it was about a month after we had reopened that the governor mandated all dining rooms and restaurants to be shut down.
Hey, Melissa, I might stop you for just a sec. Can you hear me okay? Uh-oh. We might be losing her. Can everybody else hear me okay? Okay. Oh no, it sounds like she's playing like a guitar on her audio.
Right after that announcement was made, and I was just in tears saying, what are we just did all this? Yeah.
Okay, she'll be right back with us. I will ad lib for the portion that I know about that was starting to really kind of cut out there. So yeah, they opened like the middle of February, and then yeah, COVID hit like a month later. And then the SBA was saying like, oh, all of these things, like they're pertaining to this particular date. And they were like, well, we don't even know if we're going to survive. You know, we got here and we weren't predicting this and what that looked like for their community. And so they got in at one of the worst times to get into business. Like, here, we're ready to go. And then COVID hit. Thankfully, they were in a food business, though, that lends itself well to takeout. With pizza, people could come and get things, and so their business could still survive while the directed health measures were in place. That's the part I think she's starting to cut out, is that's when the governor was restricting in-room dining and things like that. So they couldn't come into the establishment. They do have beer and liquor sales, and that got, obviously shut down, but then had the pizza as well. So that helped them do well. And I think ultimately they ended up doing better than their projections, which was nice, because we were conservative with what historical stuff looked like. But yeah, pizza is definitely a better delivery mechanism than prime rib, for example. Did that once. Don't recommend it.
Okay, now is that better?
Hopefully for now. So I got through where you were at directed health measures and you were shutting down for a while, but I think you did better than you thought you were going to, right? Better than projections.
We did. So throughout the entire year of 2020, thought, well, surely we're not going to be able to beat the sales of the previous owners. And we did. And, I think that's part of where being in a smaller community definitely lended itself better to us. I think that you saw a lot of people during that COVID time support small businesses more than maybe the bigger chain restaurants, just because they didn't want to see those local people go out of business or close their doors. So I felt like we were very fortunate from a community standpoint that we saw a lot of local support of people doing takeout and delivery throughout the entire year of 2020, just to navigate COVID. And then when we could open our dining room again, it was just, overwhelming support from the community. So it was interesting. And we just were always, okay, what are we going to do today? Like, what kind of a special are we going to run today? What are we going to do to drive people in today? Let's get people to order takeout today. It was just always ever changing. And that's where being part of a franchise is actually really helpful. So Sam and Louie's we are one of 9 franchises. And it was just really nice to be able to hear what was working for other franchisees, what was working for the franchise owners at their franchise, and just, I don't know what to do about going in and out.
We'll
my
work with
internet.
it. We'll see. If you get real crazy again with audio, then I'll ad lib.
Sorry. So we managed through COVID, and like I said, we're able to beat the sales of the previous year. And we thought, man, this is great. So when I'm going to back up a little, when Stan lost his job the first time, he was in between for about 2 months, and he told me he was going to buy this home brewing kit. And he bought this home brewing stuff. It was like $500. And he said, I'm going to start brewing beer in the garage during my downtime. I said, okay. So he started brewing beer, and the first batch was gross. And then, the second batch got a little better, and the third batch was, pretty good. And I was like, man, you're kind of onto something here. The problem is that whole garage brewing of beer is not paying any bills, and it's not adding any money financially to the household. But anyways, he kind of found his passion for that, and that kind of came back up into play earlier this year. It was right after Christmas time, and he said to me at the dinner table one night, I want to apply to be a craft brewer. And I'm like, when? Like, when do you have time to brew the beer? He was doing all the restaurant operations. He was there, 10 or 12 hours most days. I was working nights there after I would work full time at the city. We have 2 small kids aged 5 and 7, they're in activities. And it just, Sarah talked about some of the stuff that just really hit home earlier of, how do you manage it all? Thank goodness my parents live here, because they helped out a lot. They watched the kids a lot for us, and we just figured it out. I said, okay, if it's your passion and you think it's going to add some additional revenue back to business. And I knew from doing some surveys for what the community was missing. We recently redone our downtown master plan. Sarah had done survey stuff here, and it always came up that people wanted a brewery here. And so we applied for a craft brewer license, went through all of that, and we were approved. So we started brewing beer on a small little system down in the basement of a restaurant. So our building used to be an old grocery store, and he put some major time and effort into kind of changing that space downstairs into his little brew space. So started brewing beer, brewed up his first batch that he called Lawless City Light, and he called it his Busch Light converter, because he knew people here love drinking Busch Light, but that he could brew something that was kind of like it, that was craft beer, so that they would switch over to start trying more of his stuff. So we put it on tap in February, the very end of February, about a year after we reopened, and people loved it. And it's just kind of been no turning back since then. We talked more after he brewed a couple more different types of beers, and people liked those. We're like, well, this place doesn't really lend itself to craft brewery. So our restaurant was very much, I called it 1990s pizzeria-ish with the decor. So it had booths, it had like a Pepsi machine. There was no dedicated bar area. So we said, okay, well, let's invest some more money back into the business, and let's renovate the entire space. So we partnered up with a couple of local contractors who were also both former Cabela's employees, and said, hey, this is our idea. Can you guys help us bring it to life? So we closed for a week, the first week of January. We closed on Sunday, and we reopened on Saturday, and we totally renovated the entire space. We put a new bar. They built all custom tabletops. We bought all new chairs. We put in all new lighting, and totally transformed the space from that 90s-ish pizzeria to much more like hip local craft brew pub place that you would associate more of our space now with the brewery. So the brewery is going great. We recently invested some more money back into some more capital equipment and upgraded our brew system because we just couldn't keep up. In March, we started talking about when the right time for me to transfer out of the city role of economic development and into full-time at the restaurant was going to be. I was just super busy at the city. We had a lot of projects going on. We were doing a lot of different things. I was working late hours over there. Stan still needed me at the restaurant. We didn't have enough staff. We didn't have enough managers. He was still trying to do all of that restaurant operation stuff. And he was also trying to brew the beer. I said, well, there's never going to be a good time. So I guess we just figure it out, just like kind of we always have, you know, just take the leap and figure it out, because that's just what you do. I have faith that we'll make it work. And so the end of April, I put my notice in at the city and transitioned to full-time at the restaurant to take that restaurant operation side pressure off of Stan and lend him to just brew beer and be the brew side of the business. And I mean, knock on wood, so far so good. We're still super busy. We have found some good people for our staff. I applaud our staff because, man, we lost 9 people when college and school started again. And so my staff really stepped up to the plate to kind of work the extra hours and kind of fill the void of some of those people that we lost. We're still trying to find some good people, just kind of still a struggle, but I know it's not just our struggle. I know that's a struggle across the board. It's not just in the restaurant industry, it's manufacturing, it's schools, it's hospitals, it's everywhere. So we're just learning to navigate. I'm maybe working a few more hours than what I want to, but we kind of just always figured it out, and it's been really rewarding. A guy made a comment to me a couple of weeks ago and said, "What does it feel like moving from your white collar job to being a waitress?" And I said, well, I'm not a waitress. I'm actually a business owner, but I don't mind waiting the tables. And I actually really enjoy interacting with the customers. I like walking around and asking the customers how their food is. I like asking them if they like the beer. I like telling them the story of how it all came to be. And so I wanted to punch that guy actually, but anyways, I didn't. But I think he kind of got put in his place a little bit after I told him that I'm not just a waitress. I might wait the tables, I might cook pizzas in the kitchen, but our thing from the very beginning was I'm never going to ask anyone on my staff to do something I wouldn't do. I make pizzas, I clean the toilets, I sweep the floor, I mop the floor, I stock the beer. You know, I don't want to ask people on my staff to do things that I'm better than doing, because I'm not better than doing any of those things. But it's just been really great. It's been super rewarding. It's just, I don't know how to describe it. And I try to describe it to people of how it's so different, but being an entrepreneur and running your own business, the money at the end of the day means more. And I tell people, you don't get into the restaurant business because there's a lot of money into it, because trust me, and Sarah knows this, like when she told her friend to run the other way, you don't do it for the money. You do it because you're passionate about it. And you do it because I want to add something back to the community that it's always been missing, you know, and I feel like we're adding that back in. We've had such good feedback from the community of people coming through and trying our beers and then eating the pizza. And now it's appealing to people who maybe wouldn't have ever come in before because we didn't have a bar and we didn't have craft beer. And now that's what they were looking for. And now they're a lifelong customer because they tried the food and they actually really liked the food and also liked the beer. So it's just working out really well. And I'm like so thankful for the experience I had as economic development director with the city and what I learned from that to kind of mold me into being a business owner. Like I said, I never considered myself an entrepreneur. If you asked me 20 years ago what I was going to be when I grew up, I was like, oh, probably, you know, work at a corporate place and I just never, ever, ever thought I'm going to be a business owner and I'm going to own a restaurant of all things. I think Sam would have said the same thing. I mean, he got out of the industry for a reason. He said he just didn't ever want to go back to it. And now he will have conversations with people and be like, I should have just known that was what I was destined to be. And that's really my passion. And it's just been really good. And it's been a really good experience. And we're really excited of what the future holds for us. And we're talking about, what's next. We're going to eventually outgrow our place, and what's going to happen when we do outgrow our place, and how do we start becoming a distributor, and always looking forward to what's the next step and what's the next thing to keep growing the business. And I think that's part of the best thing about being your own business owner is that's your decision. You get to be the one to decide what your business's path looks like and what you're going to do next and who you're going to partner with and how you're going to get there. And it's your choice as a business owner how successful you're going to be. And you want to put in the hard work, you want to put in the effort, you want to put in the 80 hours a week, you're going to be successful. Like Sarah said at the beginning, it's not fun and games, but it's worth it. We're only a year and a half in, and we're already seeing fruits of our labor and being successful. And so I just imagine, what does the next 5 years have in store for us? It's exciting. That's what gets your blood pumping, that's just the exciting part of it.
So I'm going to throw some questions at you because we've got a couple minutes left. So
Okay.
I want to know what surprised you the most or deviated of what you thought it might be like as a business owner, versus an economic developer, right? So you had an idea, you were an economic developer, you worked with businesses, but then you actually became one. So what made you go, yeah, I didn't see that coming?
So, well, probably the biggest thing is staffing. And I know that will pass, but when we first started and when the former owner approached me and said, well, I had to fire my manager and I can't find anybody to run the business, I thought, well, surely there's people here that can work at a restaurant. Like, who can't work at a pizza place? And I never thought that staffing that place would be as hard as it has been. But like I said, we found really good staff and we're keeping them on with us. And also just how much it means for the business to be your own. I had a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs who didn't know what their next step was, didn't know what they wanted to do, didn't know if they wanted to start a business or go get a job in another corporation, or didn't know if their business idea would ever work. And I think that living that has been one of the best things that is part of our story, mine and Stan's story, is I got to see all those people start from scratch pretty much. And now they've been successful and we've been successful, and all the resources that are helpful along the way just make such a difference.
It does. So looking back on your journey so far in the last 2 years, what would you have done differently?
Honestly, I probably would have left my full-time job a year ago if I would have known how successful and how much our business here has taken off. Now, I probably wouldn't have done that and did not do that because it was COVID. But hindsight 2020, I think that there are a lot of things that have happened just over the course of the last 2 or 3 months that have really helped our business. And not all of it, but some of that has really stemmed from me being fully involved 100% of my time in the business and not trying to be economic development director, part-time pizza restaurant, brewery manager, mom, wife. I was just trying to do so many things. And now being able to dedicate my job piece of that to just the business has really helped.
Terrific. Well, we will wrap up now because we are at 1 o'clock. I'm going to show you what's next on our screen. Well, hang on, we'll get there. So what I've got then for this session for a tool is looking more at the financial aspect of things. So getting you ready for that step, is your credit score where it needs to be? Do you know your monthly budget? And several things there. And so all of the tools, so this one and tools from all the previous sessions are in the Google Drive folder, and I will make sure that it's in. Yep. So it's what I just shared there with the link. So you should be able to access all of that. That's available if you can click the link. There's 4 different PDF files in there. So you can go through the tools, kind of walk through the process. So depending on what side of the fence you're on, whether you're economic developer or a business owner, can check out those tools and things. And then all the session recordings, again, except for number 2, we had some technical issues, are on the Connecting Young Nebraskans YouTube channel. It was a long link, so I would just say type in on YouTube Connecting Young Nebraskans, and you'll pull up the videos from this session as well as previous sessions that CYN has hosted, and some great content there. And then the materials download is the link on your screen. And then again, I dropped it into the chat, but it's on the screen. So if you go back to the recording, you can see what it looks like and type that big long thing in. I don't think you can do short links on Google, but maybe you can. So I want to thank Melissa for saying yes when I asked her to do this, because we are approaching, well, really kind of started with lunchtime in the Panhandle at 11. So thank you for saying yes, and tell Stan, thanks for letting you come hang with us for a bit and
Thank
share
you
the
for
story.
inviting me. Thank you.
And we're not very kind to restaurant owners to ask you to do a lunchtime meeting. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. Really enjoy hearing your story. So thank you, Melissa. And also thank you, Sarah Bennett, for hosting these sessions. You and NBDC for taking this on and hosting this 4-part series for Nebraska Community Foundations in our network. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good afternoon. Bye.